The morning sun painted the jungle of Verdania in shades of green and gold. Deep in the thick forest, where ancient trees grew as tall as mountains, something terrible was happening. A young Korath cub named Vex stood alone in a small clearing, his body shaking with fear and hunger. Vex was not like other Korath. His people were the apex predators of this world. They were massive creatures, standing 3 times taller than humans, with thick black fur and claws made of crystal that could cut through metal. Their roars could shake the ground and make the bravest warriors run in terror. Every creature in the jungle feared the Korath, every creature except Vex. The cub looked down at his own claws. They were soft and dull, more like thick fingernails than the deadly weapons his kind was born with. When he tried to roar, only a weak whimper came out. His fur was thin and patchy, nothing like the thick coat that protected adult Korath from danger. 3 days ago, Vex had faced his coming of trial. Every young Korath had to hunt and kill a blade wolf to prove they were ready to join the adult pack. These wolves were dangerous creatures with razor-sharp teeth and lightning-fast speed. Most young Korath could defeat one easily. Vex could not even make the wolf run away. He remembered standing in the trial arena while his pack watched. The blade wolf had circled him, sensing his weakness. When Vex tried to strike with his soft claws, the wolf simply ignored the attack. It did not even bother to fight back. Instead, it walked away, showing its back to Vex like he was nothing more than a harmless plant. The shame burned in his chest even now. His mother Kisara had turned away from him that day. His father, the mighty pack leader Taruk, had spoken the words that still echoed in his mind. "You are no child of mine. You are no Korath at all. The jungle will decide your fate." After that, the entire pack had left him behind. They moved deeper into their territory, taking everything with them: food, shelter, protection, family. Vex was alone for the first time in his young life. Now, 3 days later, he was dying. Hunger gnawed at his belly like a living thing. He had tried to hunt small creatures, but even the tiny forest mice could sense his weakness. They no longer ran from him. Instead, they sat nearby and watched him with curious eyes, as if they knew he could not harm them. Vex had tried to eat plants and berries, but his Korath's stomach was not made for such food. Everything he swallowed came back up, leaving him weaker than before. His legs shook when he walked, his vision blurred at the edges. Above him, black carrion birds circled in the sky. These scavengers followed dying creatures, waiting for them to fall so they could feast. Vex knew what their presence meant. Even the birds could tell he was close to death. A rustling sound made him look up. Hope flared in his chest for just a moment. Maybe his pack had come back for him. Maybe they had changed their minds. But it was not his pack. 3 adult Korath emerged from the trees, but they were strangers. Their scent was different, marking them as members of another territory. They were probably scouts, checking the borders of their land. The largest one, a female with silver streaks in her fur, looked at Vex with cold eyes. She sniffed the air and wrinkled her nose in disgust. "What is this pathetic thing?" she asked. Her companions, "Smells like Korath, but looks like prey," answered one of the males. "Must be one of Taruk's failed cubs. I heard he had a defective one." The female stepped closer. Vex tried to stand tall and proud, the way his father had taught him, but his legs would not support him properly. He swayed and nearly fell. "Look at it," the female said with contempt. "Soft claws, weak body, cannot even stand straight. This is what happens when bloodlines grow thin?" The third scout, a younger male, tilted his head. "Should we end its suffering?" "It will die anyway." "No," the female replied. "Let nature take its course. This thing is not worth dirtying our claws. The jungle will clean up this mistake soon enough." They turned and walked away, leaving Vex alone again. But their words hit him harder than any physical blow. Even strangers could see his worthlessness. Even other Korath wanted nothing to do with him. Vex collapsed to the ground, too weak to stay standing. The soft earth felt cool against his fevered skin. He closed his eyes and tried to remember better times. He thought of his mother's warm fur when he was very small. He remembered playing with his littermates before they grew strong, and he remained weak. He thought of his father's proud voice when he still believed Vex might grow into a proper Korath warrior. Those memories felt like dreams now, like things that had happened to someone else. The sun began to set, painting the jungle in deep reds and purples. Night was coming, and with it, the true predators. Vex knew he would not survive another night in the open. His strength was almost gone. He could barely keep his eyes open. A new sound reached his ears. It was different from the natural sounds of the jungle. Mechanical, artificial. Vex had heard such sounds before, during the rare times when skyboats had passed overhead. The sounds of technology dot through his blurred vision. He saw lights moving between the trees, not the warm glow of fire, but the cold white light of human devices. Voices drifted to him on the wind, speaking in the strange, soft language of the humans. Vex had seen humans before, though always from a distance. His father had called them the weak ones and said they were not worth hunting because they had no claws or fangs. They were small and soft, with strange coverings on their skin and tools that did their fighting for them now. As darkness fell and death crept closer, Vex found himself hoping these weak ones might notice him. It was a shameful thought for a Korath to have, but shame no longer mattered. Nothing mattered except the fading spark of life in his chest. The lights came closer, the voices grew louder, and in his final moments of consciousness, Vex wondered if even the humans would turn away from something as broken as him. The carrion birds cried overhead, impatient for their feast. Dr. Tejo pushed through the thick jungle plants, his scanner beeping softly in his hand. The device was picking up unusual life signs just ahead, something large, but with a very weak heartbeat. He adjusted his headlamp and called out to his research partner. Jinwoo over here, I think we found something. Jinwoo hurried over, carrying their medical kit. He was younger than Tejo, fresh out of university, but eager to help with their mission on Verdania. The two men had been collecting plant samples for 3 hours, but this was more important. What is it? Jinwoo asked, looking at the scanner readings. Something big, but dying. Heartbeat is very slow. Body temperature dropping fast. Tejo moved his light back and forth, searching through the shadows. There, look. The beam of light fell on a small clearing where a young Korath lay motionless on the ground. Even unconscious, the cub was impressive. He was already as big as a large dog, though he would grow much larger if he lived. His black fur was matted and dirty, and his breathing was so shallow it was hard to see. Oh no, Jinwoo whispered. It's just a baby. Tejo knelt beside the cub and checked for injuries. No wounds that I can see. But he's starving. Probably. Been alone for days. Should we call Dr. Miran? Jinwoo asked. Miran was their team leader, a strict woman who followed every rule exactly. Tejo thought for a moment. He knew what Miran would say. Their mission was to study the planet, not interfere with local wildlife. The rules were clear about not getting involved with native species. But looking at the dying cub, Tejo could not just walk away. Help me, get him to the transport, Tejo said. We can argue about rules later. Jinwoo nodded without hesitation. Together, they carefully lifted the unconscious cub. He was heavier than he looked, and his body was burning with fever. They carried him through the jungle to their small transport vehicle and laid him gently in the back. The ride back to the research station was quiet except for the cub's labored breathing. Tejo drove as fast as he dared, while Jinwoo monitored the young Korath's vital signs. His heart is getting weaker, Jinwoo reported. We need to get him help soon. The research station appeared through the trees like a beacon of hope. It was a collection of white buildings connected by covered walkways. Solar panels gleamed on the roofs, and a protective energy barrier shimmered around the whole complex. They carried the cub straight to the medical bay, where Dr. Hyjin was organizing supplies. She was the station's medical officer, a calm woman, with gentle hands and a kind face. What do we have here? She asked, then stopped when she saw what they were carrying. Tejo, please tell me you did not just bring a Korath into our station. He's dying, Tejo said simply. I could not leave him. Before Hyjin could respond, Dr. Moran's voice cut through the air like a blade. What is the meaning of this? Everyone turned to see the team leader standing in the doorway. Miran was a tall woman with sharp eyes and gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. She looked at the cub on the medical table with obvious disapproval. Dr. Tejo, she said in a cold voice, explain yourself. We found him dying in the jungle. Tejo replied, he's just a baby. He is a native life form, and our mission protocols strictly forbid interference with local wildlife. Miran stepped closer to the table. You have violated our most basic rules. He will die if we do nothing, Jinwoo said quietly. Miran turned her sharp gaze on the younger man. That is not our concern. We are here to observe and study, not to play doctor to every sick animal we find. This is not just any animal, Tejo argued. This is a Korath cub. These creatures are incredibly intelligent. They have complex social structures, language, culture. If we can save him, we might learn things that could help both our species. Or we might contaminate their natural development. Miran shot back. What if his pack abandoned him for good reasons? What if he carries diseases that could spread to other What if saving him disrupts their entire social order? Hyjin cleared her throat. If I may interrupt, we need to make a decision quickly. His condition is getting worse by the minute. All eyes turned to the medical officer. She was checking the cub's pulse and temperature with her instruments. Severe dehydration and malnutrition, she reported. His body temperature is dangerously low. He has maybe an hour before organ failure begins. Then we let nature take its course, Miran said firmly. No, the word came from Tejo with surprising force. I will not let a child die when we have the power to save him. This is not a human child, Miran reminded him. Does that matter? Jinwoo asked. Pain is pain. Suffering is suffering. Species should not matter when a life is at stake. Miran looked around the room at her team. She could see the determination in their faces. Even Hyjin, who usually stayed out of arguments, was preparing medical equipment. If we do this, Miran said slowly, and headquarters finds out, we could all lose our careers. The non-interference directive exists for good reasons. Some things are more important than careers, Teho replied. Bat. Miran stared at him for a long moment. Then she looked at the unconscious cub, so small and helpless on the medical table. Despite her stern exterior, she was not a cruel woman. She had dedicated her life to understanding and protecting life in all its forms. Fine, she said at last, we save him. But this stays between us, and if there are any negative consequences, the responsibility is yours, Dr. Teho. I accept that responsibility, Teho said, without hesitation. Hyjin immediately went to work. She started an IV to get fluids into the cub's system and used warming blankets to raise his body temperature. Jinwoo helped by monitoring his vital signs while Teho mixed a special nutrient solution. His species is carnivorous, Teho explained as he worked, but his stomach is too weak for solid food right now. We need to start with liquid nutrition. As the hours passed, the cub's condition slowly improved. His breathing became deeper and more regular. His heartbeat grew stronger. The fever began to break. He's going to make it, Hyjin announced with relief. Jin-Woo smiled for the first time since they had found the cub. What should we call him? We are not naming him, Miran said quickly. We treat him, get him healthy, and then release him back to the wild. No attachments. But even as she spoke, she found herself looking at the sleeping cub with something that might have been fondness. His face was peaceful now, no longer twisted with pain. He looked so young, so innocent. He reminds me of my nephew when he was small, Hyjin said softly. Do not humanize him, Miran warned. He is an apex predator. When he grows up, he will be one of the most dangerous creatures on this planet. Right now, he is just a scared, hungry child who needed help. Teho replied, and we gave it to him. As night fell over the research station, the team took turns, watching over their unexpected patient. None of them knew that their simple act of compassion would change the course of history for both humans and Korath alike. The cub slept peacefully, his body finally free from pain. In his dreams, he was not alone anymore. Vex woke up slowly, his mind fuzzy like thick fog. The first thing he noticed was warmth, real warmth, not the cold fear that had filled his body for days. The second thing was the strange smells around him, clean smells, medicine smells, and, underneath it all, the scent of humans. He tried to jump up but his body would not obey. He was too weak, and there were tubes connected to his arm. Panic filled his chest. Where was he? What had happened to him? Easy there, little one, a soft voice said. You are safe. Vex turned his head and saw a human female sitting nearby. She had kind eyes and was wearing white clothes. This was Dr. Hyjin, though Vex did not know her name yet. She moved slowly, keeping her hands where he could see them. Do not be afraid, she said in her gentle voice. We helped you. You were very sick, but you are getting better now. Vex tried to speak, but only a weak whimper came out. Even that small sound made his throat hurt. The human female reached for a cup of water. Here, drink this. Small sips. She held the cup to his lips. Vex wanted to refuse help from these strange creatures, but he was so thirsty. The water tasted clean and cool. It was the best thing he had ever tasted. Good, the human said. You have been sleeping for 2 days. Your body needed time to heal. 2 days, Vex could hardly believe it. The last thing he remembered was lying in the jungle, waiting to die. Now he was in some kind of white room with bright lights and strange machines. Everything was so different from the forest he knew. The door opened, and 2 more humans entered. One was older with gray hair. The other was young with a friendly face. These were Dr. Miran and Jinwoo. How is our patient? The older one asked. Much better, Hyjin replied. His fever is gone, and he is drinking water. The older human looked at Vex with sharp eyes. Good, the sooner he recovers, the sooner we can return him to his natural habitat. Vex did not understand all their words, but he could sense the older human did not want him there. He could smell her discomfort. Her worry had made him feel unwelcome and small. The younger human sat down nearby. Hello there, he said with a smile. I am Jinwoo. What should we call you? Vex stared at him. These humans wanted to know his name. His own pack had forgotten his name when they abandoned him. He tried to say it, but his voice was still too weak. Take your time, Jinwoo said patiently. Over the next few days, Vex grew stronger. The humans fed him small amounts of liquid food that his stomach could handle. They changed his bedding and kept him clean. They spoke to him in soft voices and never made sudden movements that might scare him. It was so different from how his own kind had treated him. Korath were loud and rough, even with their young. These humans were gentle and careful. As if they understood how fragile he felt, Dr. Teho visited often. He was the one who had found Vex in the jungle, though Vex did not know this yet. Teho would sit beside his bed and talk about simple things. The weather outside, the plants he was studying, the work the humans were doing on this planet. We are scientists, Teho explained one day. We study life on different worlds. We want to understand how plants and animals live and grow. Vex listened carefully. He was beginning to understand more of their language. His mind seemed to pick up new words quickly, faster than he had ever learned anything before. On his 5th day in the medical room, something wonderful happened. A new human came to visit. Her name was Soman, and she was the communications specialist for the team. She had heard about the young Korath and wanted to meet him. "Hello," she said in a warm voice. Then she said something in a different language, with different sounds. "That means hello in your language," she explained. "I have been studying Korath's speech patterns." Vex's eyes went wide. She had spoken in Korath, though her accent was strange. No human had ever tried to speak his language before. "Can you understand me?" she asked, switching back to human speech. Vex nodded slowly. Then, with great effort, he tried to speak. "Yes," he whispered. It was the first word he had spoken since waking up. So-Min smiled brightly. "Wonderful. Would you like to learn more human words?" From that day forward, Soman visited. Every morning, she would sit with Vex and teach him new words. Simple things at first. Yes, no, please, thank you, hungry, tired, happy, sad. Vex learned quickly, his mind absorbing the new language like a dry sponge soaking up water. "You are very smart," Soman told him, "much smarter than we expected." This made Vex feel strange. His own pack had always told him he was stupid and useless. They said his weakness made him slow and dumb. But these humans seemed to think his mind was special. Another human started visiting too. His name was Dong-Su, and he was the station's engineer. He took care of all the machines and tools that kept the research station running. "I heard you are interested in how things work," Dong-Su said during his first visit. He was carrying a small device that beeped and flashed with lights. "This is a scanner. It tells us about the air and temperature." Vex watched with fascination as Dong-Su showed him how the device worked. The engineer noticed his intense interest. "Would you like to try holding it?" Dong-Su asked. Vex looked at his own claws. They were still soft and weak, not like the claws of adult Korath, but maybe they could be useful for something else. Dong-Su carefully placed the scanner in Vex's claws. The young Korath held it gently, turning it over to look at all its parts. His claws were perfect for pressing the small buttons and switches. "Interesting," Dong-Su murmured. "Your claws are actually very good for delicate work. Better than our fingers in some ways." Over the following weeks, Dong-Su brought more devices for Vex to examine. Simple tools at first, then more complex machines. Vex showed an amazing ability to understand how things worked just by looking at them. One day Dong-Su brought a broken scanner that had stopped working. "I cannot figure out what is wrong with this," he said. "Maybe you can spot something I missed." Vex studied the device carefully. His claws traced along the circuits inside. After a few minutes, he found a tiny wire that had come loose. Using the tip of his claw, he carefully pushed it back into place. The scanner beeped and came to life. Dong-Su stared in amazement. "How did you do that?" "I have been trying to fix this for days." Vex felt a warm glow in his chest. For the first time in his life, he had done something useful, something that impressed others. His soft claws, which had made him weak as a hunter, were perfect for this kind of work. "You have a gift," Dong-Su told him. "A very special gift." As the days passed, Vex began to feel something he had never felt before. He felt wanted. The humans did not see him as a failure or a mistake. They saw him as someone with value, someone worth caring about. But late at night, when the station was quiet, Vex would sometimes hear sounds from the jungle outside. The distant roars of Korath hunting parties. His own kind, living their lives. Without him, part of him still longed to be accepted by them, to find his place in a Korath pack. He did not know that some of those hunting parties had been watching the research station from the shadows. They had seen the humans taking care of their reject cub. They whispered among themselves about the shame of it, how their failed packmate was living with the weak ones. But they also whispered about something else they had noticed. The cub was changing, growing, not just in body, but in mind. And that change would soon put him to a test that would surprise everyone, including himself. The storm came without warning, like an angry beast from the sky. Vex woke to the sound of howling wind and crashing thunder. The research station shook around him as rain hammered against the walls. But this was not an ordinary storm. Emergency lights flashed red throughout the building. A loud alarm rang over and over, making Vex cover his ears with his claws. He had never heard such a frightening sound. Dr. Tejo rushed into his room, his face full of worry. "Vex, we need to move you to the safe room. The storm is damaging our power systems." "What is wrong?" Vex asked. His human language was much better now, after weeks of practice. "The storm has electromagnetic pulses," Tejo explained as he helped Vex out of bed. "It is destroying our electronics. Our main power core is failing." They hurried through the corridors of the station. Other humans ran past them, carrying tools and equipment. Everyone looked scared and desperate. Vex had never seen the calm humans act this way before. In the main control room, Dr. Miran was shouting orders while Jinwoo and Dong-Su worked frantically at their computers. "How long do we have?" Miran demanded. "Maybe 2 hours before complete power failure," replied, sweat running down his face. The backup systems are already overloading. What happens if the power fails completely? Vex asked Somin, who was standing nearby. Her face was pale with fear. The energy barrier that protects the station will collapse. Without it, the radiation from the storm will kill everything in the jungle for many miles around, including us. Vex felt cold fear in his stomach. These humans had saved his life and cared for him like family. Now they were all in terrible danger. Can you fix the power core? He asked. Hi, Dash. Jin shook her head sadly. The core is in a sealed chamber deep underground. The radiation there is already too strong for humans to survive, even with our protective suits. We could try sending repair robots, Dongsu suggested. All our robots are too big to fit through the access tunnel, Miran replied, and the electromagnetic pulse is scrambling their circuits anyway. Vex listened to their desperate planning and felt something growing inside his chest. Not fear, but determination. These people had given him a new life when his own kind had thrown him away. They had shown him kindness when he thought he would die alone. Now it was his turn to help them. I can do it, he said quietly. Everyone stopped talking and looked at him. What did you say? Miran asked. I can fix the power core, Vex repeated. Louder this time. I am small enough to fit through the tunnel. My body can handle more radiation than humans can. Absolutely not, Tejo said immediately. You are just a child. We will not risk your life. You risked your careers to save me, Vex replied. Now I want to save you. Dr. Miran studied him with her sharp eyes. Even if you could survive the radiation long enough, do you understand how complex the power core is? Dongsu pulled up a diagram on his computer screen. These are the circuits that need to be repaired. The connections are very delicate. One mistake could cause an explosion. Vex looked at the complex diagram. His mind absorbed the patterns and connections quickly, the way it always did with mechanical things. I understand, he said. My claws are good for delicate work. Dongsu taught me. This is insane, Haijin protested. He could die from radiation poisoning. We will all die if someone does not fix the core, Vex pointed out. At least this way, some of us might live. The storm grew stronger outside. The lights flickered as another power surge hit the station. They were running out of time. I have to try, Vex said firmly. You gave me a chance to live. Now let me give you the same chance. Miran looked around at her team. She could see the fear in their faces, but also hope. Vex was their only option. If we do this, she said slowly, you follow our instructions exactly. No heroics, no taking extra risks. You get in, make the repairs, and get out as fast as possible. Vex nodded eagerly. I promise. They prepared quickly. Dongsu gave Vex the special tools he would need. Somin taught him the exact words to say over the radio so they could guide him. Haijin explained the warning signs of radiation. Sickness to watch for. The entrance to the underground tunnels was in the basement of the station. As they descended, Vex could feel the heat and energy from the damaged power core. The air itself seemed to buzz with dangerous electricity. The tunnel entrance is there. Dongsu pointed to a narrow opening in the wall. Follow it straight down for about 50 meters. The core chamber is at the end. Vex squeezed into the tunnel. It was tight even for him, and he could understand why the humans could not fit. The walls glowed with a sickly green light from the radiation. As he crawled deeper, the heat grew stronger. His skin began to tingle and burn, but he pushed forward, thinking of the humans who were counting on him. Vex, can you hear us? Somin's voice crackled through his radio. Yes, I am almost there, he replied. The tunnel opened into a large chamber, filled with humming machines. At the center was the power core, a massive cylinder covered with blinking lights and tangled wires. Several panels had been blown open by the electromagnetic pulses, exposing the delicate circuits inside. I can see the damage, Vex reported. It looks just like the diagram. Good, Dongsu's voice guided him. Start with the main power coupling on the left side. The red wire should connect to the blue terminal. Vex got to work. His soft claws, once seen as a sign of weakness, proved perfect for this delicate task. He could grip the tiny wires without crushing them and reach into narrow spaces that would have been impossible for human fingers. The radiation made him feel sick and dizzy, but he forced himself to concentrate, one connection at a time. One repair after another. The humans talked him through each step, their voices keeping him focused. Excellent work, Dongsu encouraged him. Just 2 more connections and the core should stabilize. As Vex made the final repairs, he heard something that made his heart skip. Voices outside the chamber, but not human voices. These were the deep, rumbling sounds of Korath's speech. A hunting party had been caught in the storm and taken shelter. Near the research station, they were close enough to see what was happening. Look at that, one of them growled. The weak cub is inside the human den, probably begging for scraps. Another laughed cruelly. But as they watched through the station's windows, they saw something that made them stop laughing. They saw humans running around in panic, saw the emergency lights flashing, saw the energy barrier flickering and failing. and they realized that the cub they had called worthless was deep underground, risking his life to save the creatures who had cared for him. Final connection complete, Vex announced weakly. The radiation had made him very sick, but he had finished the job. The power core hummed back to life. The lights throughout the station grew bright and steady. The energy barrier strengthened, protecting everyone from the storm's deadly radiation. You did it. Tejo's voice was full of joy and relief. Vex, you saved us all. As Vex crawled back through the tunnel, his body shaking from radiation exposure, he felt something he had never felt before. Pride, real pride in something he had accomplished. Not the false pride his father had demanded, but the quiet satisfaction of knowing he had made a difference. The hunting party outside watched in stunned silence as the young cub emerged from the underground tunnels. They had seen him do something that no adult Korath could have done, something that required not just courage, but intelligence and skill. For the first time, they began to wonder if they had been wrong about what made someone truly strong. News of what Vex had done spread through the Korath territories like wildfire. The hunting party that had witnessed his heroic act could not stop talking about it. They told other packs, who told other packs, until every Korath on the planet had heard the story. The weak cub who had been abandoned by his own kind had saved an entire research station. He had done something that no adult Korath warrior could have accomplished. The story grew with each telling, but the basic truth remained the same. The failure had succeeded where the strong had failed. 3 weeks after the storm, a formal message arrived at the research station. It was written in the old Korath language on traditional stone tablets, carried by a messenger who left them at the station's entrance and departed without a word. Soman translated the message for the human team. It is from the Elder Council, she announced, her voice full of surprise. They want to meet with Vex. Dr. Miran frowned. The Elder Council, I thought they never involved themselves with outsiders. They do not, Tejo agreed. This is unprecedented. Vex had been recovering from his radiation exposure, growing stronger each day. The humans had taken excellent care of him, and now he was healthier than he had ever been. But the thought of facing the Elder Council filled him with fear. What do they want with me? He asked. The message says they wish to understand what you have become. Soman replied. They have questions about your abilities and your time with humans. You do not have to go, Jinwoo said firmly. You are under our protection. But Vex shook his head. I want to go. I need to face them. The meeting was arranged for neutral ground, a large clearing in the jungle that had been used for important gatherings for thousands of years. Ancient stone pillars marked the sacred space, covered with carvings that told the history of the Korath people. When the day came, the entire human research team accompanied Vex to the meeting. Dr. Miran had argued against it, saying it was too dangerous. But Vex insisted he needed his human family there for support. The Elder Council was already waiting when they arrived. 7 ancient Koraths sat in a semicircle, their fur silver with age, their crystal claws worn smooth by centuries of use. At their center sat Veltera, the oldest and most respected Korath alive. She was massive even by Korath standards, and her eyes held the wisdom of many lifetimes. Behind the elders stood representatives from every major pack on the planet. Vex could see his own father, Torek, among them. The mighty pack leader would not meet his son's eyes. So, Veltara's voice was deep and commanding. This is the cub who has caused such talk among our people. Vex stepped forward, trying to stand as tall and proud as possible. But next to these ancient giants, he still looked very small. Yes, elder, he replied respectfully. We have heard strange stories about you. Another elder said, they say you work with tools like the humans do. They say you think in ways that no Korath has ever thought before. Is this true? Veltora asked. Vex nodded. Yes, elder, the humans taught me many things. A ripple of disapproval went through the assembled Korath. Working with tools was considered beneath their dignity. They were apex predators, meant to hunt with claw and fang, not to rely on artificial aids. Show us. Veltera commanded. Dong Su had brought several devices for this purpose. He set up a complex puzzle box in the center of the clearing. It was made of metal and crystal, with intricate locks and hidden mechanisms. This puzzle has stumped our greatest minds for generations, Veltera explained. If you are truly as intelligent as the stories claim, perhaps you can solve it. Vex approached the puzzle box carefully. It was beautiful, covered with symbols and patterns that seemed to shift and change as he looked at them. He could see that it was not just a test of intelligence, but of understanding Korath culture and history. He studied it for several minutes, his claws tracing the various symbols. Slowly, he began to understand the pattern. It was not just a mechanical puzzle, but a philosophical one. It asked questions about strength, weakness, and what it truly meant to be Korath. One by one, Vex pressed the correct symbols and turned the proper mechanisms. The box began to open, revealing more layers inside. Each layer was more complex than the last, requiring deeper understanding. The assembled Korath watched in amazement. Some of the greatest minds in their history had tried to solve this puzzle, yet here was a young cub, barely past childhood, unlocking secrets that had been hidden for centuries. When the final layer opened, a beautiful crystal emerged from the center of the box. It glowed with soft light, and ancient music filled the air around it. Impossible, one of the elders whispered. Velterra leaned forward, her ancient eyes studying Vex with new interest. How did you solve it? The puzzle was not about being strong. In the old way, Vex explained, it was about finding new kinds of strength. The symbols showed the history of our people, but also pointed to what we could become if we were willing to change. And what did you learn from the humans that helped? You see this? Velterra asked. Vex thought carefully before answering. They taught me that weakness and strength are not always what they seem. My soft claws were seen as a sign of failure, but they let me do delicate work that strong claws cannot do. My small size made me weak in battle, but it let me go places that large warriors cannot reach. He gestured toward his human friends. Humans are smaller and weaker than us in many ways, but they work together. They use tools. They solve problems with their minds instead of just their strength. And because of this, they can do things that even the mightiest Korath cannot do. You speak of cooperation, another elder said with distaste. Korath are meant to be solitary hunters. Are we? Vex challenged, respectfully. We live in packs. We raise our young together. We already cooperate in many ways. What if we cooperated even more? What if we learned from other species instead of just dominating them? A heated debate broke out among the elders. Some were intrigued by Vex's words, while others were horrified by the suggestion that Korath might need to change their ways. Vel raised her claw for silence. There is something you all must know, she announced. Our species is in danger. A shocked silence fell over the gathering. For generations, we have prided ourselves on being the apex predators of this world, Velt continued, but our pure focus on physical strength has come at a cost. We have not advanced technologically. We have not developed new ways of thinking. While other species in the galaxy grow and change, we remain the same. She pointed to the crystal that Vex had unlocked. This puzzle was created by our ancestors as a warning. They foresaw that our rigid ways might lead to our doom. They hid this test, hoping that someday a Korath would arise who could think differently. Velterra's gaze fell on Vex. You are that Korath, young one. You represent a new path for our people, but at what cost? Taruk finally spoke, his voice full of pain. He is no longer truly Look at him, living with aliens, thinking like them, instead of us. I am still Korath, Vex replied firmly, but I am also something new, something that our people need if we are to survive. Velterra nodded slowly. The choice before us is clear. We can cling to the old ways and slowly fade into history. Or we can embrace change and grow stronger than we have ever been. She stood up, her massive form casting a shadow over the entire gathering. The council will deliberate on what we have learned here today. But first, young Vex, you must make a choice of your own. Velterra's words hung in the air like a heavy weight. The entire gathering waited to hear what choice the ancient elder would offer to Vex. You have shown us abilities that no Korath has ever possessed, Velterra said, her voice carrying across the sacred clearing. You have proven that there might be a new path for our people. But you have also been changed by your time with the humans. She stepped closer to Vex, her massive form towering over him. We offer you this choice. Renounce your human influences. Come back to live among your own kind as an honored member of our society. Help us learn your skills while keeping our traditional ways intact. Vex felt his heart leap. To be accepted by his own people, to have a place in Korath society after being cast out, it was everything he had dreamed of during those long, lonely nights. But, Velterra continued, if you choose this path, you must cut all ties with the humans. You cannot be both Korath and human influenced. You must choose one world or the other. The silence that followed was complete. Even the jungle seemed to hold its breath. Dr. Tejo stepped forward. Vex, whatever you choose, we will understand. You belong with your own people. No, Dr. Moran said quietly. He belongs wherever he chooses to belong. Vex looked at the humans who had become his family. Tejo, who had risked his career to save a dying cub. Soman, who had patiently taught him to speak. Dongsu, who had shown him the joy of understanding how things work. Haijin, who had nursed him back to health with gentle hands. Jinwu, who had supported him from the very beginning. Then he looked at the assembled Korath. His father stood. Among them, still unable to meet his eyes, the pack leaders who had scorned him, the elders who offered acceptance now, but only on their terms. There is something else you should know, Velterra said before Vex could speak. You are not the only one. A murmur went through the crowd. What did she mean? We have been investigating. Since we first heard about you, the ancient elder explained, we discovered that there are others like you hidden throughout our territories. Cubs, who were born different, like you were. Cubs, whose families have been secretly protecting them. Instead of abandoning them, Vex's eyes went wide. Others like me, yes, at least 12 that we have found so far, perhaps more. They all show the same traits. Soft claws, enhanced intelligence, different ways of thinking. Their families have been hiding them, afraid of what would happen if the truth came out. One of the younger elders spoke up. If you choose to stay with the humans, these cubs will likely remain hidden forever. Their potential will be wasted. But if you return to us, you could help teach them. You could be the leader of a new generation of Korath. It was a powerful argument, and Vex felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. Other cubs like him, living in fear and hiding. He could help them. He could give them the chance he had been given. But then he heard a small sound. From behind him, Ara, the youngest member of the human research team, was crying quietly. She had joined the team only recently, but she had quickly grown attached to Vex. Please do not cry, Vex said, turning to comfort her. I am sorry, she said through her tears. I know you should be with your own people. I will miss you so much. Her honest emotion hit Vex harder than any logical argument could have. This young human woman cared about him not because of what he could do for her people, but simply because she loved him as family. We all will, Jinwoo added softly. Vex looked around at the humans again. They were not trying to influence his choice. They were not offering him rewards or making demands. They simply loved him and wanted him to be happy, whatever that meant. I have made my decision, Vex announced, his voice carrying clearly across the clearing. Every Korath leaned forward to hear his words. I choose to stay with the humans, he said firmly, but I also choose to help the hidden cubs. I will not abandon others like me just because the choice is difficult. Velterra frowned. That is not one of the options we offered. Then I am making a new option, Vex replied with growing confidence. You said I represent a new path for our people. Well, this is that path. Not choosing between the old ways and the new ways, but finding a way to bring them together. He gestured toward the research station visible through the trees. Let the cubs, who are like me, come to the human station. Let us create a place where Korath intelligence can grow alongside human knowledge. Let us show both our peoples what we can accomplish together. Impossible, one of the traditional elders growled. Korath, do not mix with other species. Why? Not, Vex challenged. Because it has never been done before. Many things that are normal now were once impossible. The first Korath to use crystal claws was probably called crazy. The first pack to hunt together was probably seen as weak. Taruke finally stepped forward. For the first time since abandoning his son, he looked directly at Vex. You would create a new kind of pack, the pack leader said slowly, made up of different species. Yes, Vex replied. A pack based not on blood or species, but on choice and mutual support. And you think this would work? Vex smiled, showing teeth that were smaller and less sharp than those of other Koraths, but no less determined. It already works. The humans accepted me when my own kind cast me out. They taught me, cared for me, gave me purpose. Now I want to offer the same thing to other cubs like me. Velterra was quiet for a long time, thinking deeply. Finally, she spoke again. This is not the choice we expected you to make. It is more complex and more difficult than either of the paths we offered. The best choices usually are, Vex replied. Very well, the ancient elders said at last. We will allow this experiment. The cubs who show your traits will be permitted to join you at the human station, if they choose to do so. But understand this, young Vex, you will be responsible for their safety and their development. And you will be judged by the results. I understand, Vex said solemnly. And if this new path fails, another elder warned, if these cubs become lost between worlds like you claim not to be, then we will intervene. The traditional ways will be restored. It will not fail, Vex said with quiet confidence. Because it is not really new at all. It is just the next step in what we have always been. Korath who adapt and survive and grow stronger. As the formal meeting ended and the various packs began to disperse, Taruk approached his son one more time. I was wrong to abandon you, the pack leader said, his voice heavy with regret. I thought I was protecting our bloodline from weakness. Instead, I nearly destroyed something precious. You did what you thought was right, Vex replied. Now I am doing what I think is right. Taruk nodded slowly. You have grown wise. My son, wiser than your old father. I had good teachers, Vex said, glancing back at the humans who waited patiently for him. Yes, Taruk agreed. You did. As they walked back toward the research station, Dr. Tejo fell into step beside Vex. Are you sure about this choice? The human scientist asked. It will not be easy, building a bridge between two very different worlds. Vex looked up at the man who had saved his life. Nothing worthwhile is ever easy. But that has never stopped humans from trying. And it will not stop me either. Behind them, the sacred clearing stood empty except for the ancient stone pillars. But change was coming to the Korath people, carried forward by a young cub who refused to choose between the family that had found him and the family he hoped to build. 6 months later, the research station looked completely different. What had once been a small collection of buildings had grown into a thriving colony. New structures had been built to accommodate both human and Korath residents. Gardens grew, where human botanical knowledge had been combined with Korath understanding of the local ecosystem. Vex stood on the observation deck of the main building. watching the morning activities in the courtyard below. 15 young Korath were practicing with various tools and devices under the guidance of Dongsu and Somin. Their laughter mixed with the sounds of learning, creating a symphony that would have been impossible to imagine just months ago. These were the cubs who had been hidden by their families, the ones born different like Vex had been. They had arrived, one by one, over the past few months, brought by parents who had heard about the colony and dared to hope their defective children might have a future after all. Each cub was unique. Nara had claws even softer than Vex's, but she could manipulate the most delicate electronics with ease. Kito was smaller than other Korath his age, but his mind could solve mathematical problems that challenged even the human computers. Young Zara could barely roar at all, but she had learned to speak 5 different languages fluently. "Good morning, Teacher Vex," a cheerful voice called out. Vex turned to see Mino, the youngest of the cubs, climbing up to join him on the deck. At barely 6 months old, Mino was about the size of a human child, with fur that was more gray than black and eyes full of curiosity. "Good morning, Mino," Vex replied warmly. "How are your lessons going?" "Dr. Hygen says I am very good at understanding how plants grow," Mino said proudly. "I want to help make the gardens even better." This was what Vex loved most about his new role. Each cub had different talents and interests. Some, like Kato, were drawn to technology and engineering. Others, like Zara, loved languages and communication. A few, like Mino, were fascinated by biology and agriculture. The humans had embraced these differences completely. Rather than trying to make all the cubs the same, they encouraged each one to develop their unique abilities. It was a revolutionary approach that was already showing amazing results. "Teacher Vex," another voice called from below. "We need your help with something." Vex looked down to see Dr. Tejo waving at him from the courtyard. Next to him stood 2 adult Korath that Vex did not recognize. Visitors were becoming more common as word spread about the colony, but these 2 looked particularly serious. Vex made his way downstairs. With Mino following close behind, the young cub had appointed himself as Vex's assistant and took the job very seriously. "Vex, I would like you to meet Carthon and Vieira," Tejo said. "They are representatives from the Northern Territories." The Northern Territories were known for having the most traditional Korath packs. They rarely had contact with outsiders and were suspicious of any changes to their ancient ways. "We have come to see this place for ourselves," Carthon said, his voice neutral but his eyes watchful. "The stories we have heard seem ... unlikely." "What kind of stories?" Vex asked politely. "Stories of Korath cubs working with technology," Vieira replied. "Stories of cooperation between species. Stories of young ones who think they can improve on thousands of years of tradition." There was clear skepticism in her voice, but Vex did not take offense. He had learned that the best way to convince doubters was simply to show them the truth. "Would you like a tour of our facilities?" he offered. Over the next hour, Vex guided the visitors through the colony. They saw Nara and Jinwoo working together to design a new water purification system. They watched Kato teaching Dr. Mirin about Korath mathematical concepts that had never been written down before. They observed Zara leading a group of younger cubs in a lesson about jungle safety, switching effortlessly between Korath and human languages. At first, the northern representatives said very little, but as the tours continued, Vex noticed their expressions beginning to change. The skepticism was slowly being replaced by something else. Wonder, perhaps, and maybe a little bit of hope. "This is impossible," Carthon muttered as they watched a group of cubs and humans working together to repair a piece of equipment. "And yet it is happening," Vex replied simply. Their final stop was the communications center, where Somin was coordinating with research teams from other worlds. The room was filled with screens showing data from across the galaxy. "We have been in contact with 17 different species so far," Somin explained to the visitors. "Many of them are interested in establishing cultural exchanges with both humans and Korath. Other species want to learn from us." Vieira asked in surprise. "Of course," Vex said. "We have much to offer. Korath's strength and wisdom, combined with human innovation and cooperation, together we can solve problems that neither species could handle alone." As if to prove his point, an urgent message came through the communications system. There was a crisis on a mining world in a nearby system. A massive equipment failure had trapped hundreds of workers underground. The rescue teams were having trouble reaching them because the tunnels were too narrow for their large machines and too unstable for heavy excavation. "We could help with that," Nara said, studying the technical specifications. "Small robots guided by someone who understands both the technology and the geology." The Korath understanding of underground spaces, combined with human engineering, Keto added excitedly. It could work. Within an hour, a plan had been developed. A joint human Korath team would travel to the mining world with specially designed rescue equipment. The cubs would help design the robots, while the adult humans would handle the technical implementation. Carthon and Vieira watched in amazement as the entire colony mobilized to help complete strangers on a distant world. "Why do you care about these miners?" Vieira asked Vex. They are not your pack. They are not even your species. Vex thought about the question carefully. When I was dying in the jungle, these humans could have walked away. They had no obligation to help me, but they chose to care anyway. They taught me that family is not just about blood or species. It is about choosing to help each other. He gestured toward the cubs working on the rescue plan. Now these young ones are learning the same lesson. They are choosing to use their gifts to help others, even strangers they will never meet, and this makes them stronger. Carthon asked. Much stronger, Vex replied. Strong enough to solve problems that seemed impossible. Strong enough to build bridges between worlds that were once enemies. Strong enough to create a future that neither species could have achieved alone. Later that evening, as the rescue mission was being launched, Carthon and Vayara prepared to return to their own territories. We will report what we have seen here, Carthon told Vex. There will be debate among our people about what it means. Some will want to join this experiment, Vayara added. Others will resist any change at all. Change is never easy, Vex acknowledged, but it is necessary for growth. As the northern representatives departed, Dr. Tejo joined Vex on the observation deck where they had started the day. Do you think they will convince their people to accept what we are doing here? Tejo asked. Vex watched the lights of the colony below. Cubs and humans working together, learning from each other, building something entirely new. Some will accept it immediately, others will take time. But eventually, they will see what we have seen. And what is that? Vex smiled, his soft claws resting on the railing beside his human friend's hands. That the strongest pack is not the one with the biggest claws or the loudest roars. It is the one that chooses to include everyone who wants to belong. A message came through the communications system. The rescue mission had been successful. All the trapped miners had been saved. Thanks to the combined efforts of human engineering and Korath geological knowledge, cheers erupted throughout the colony as news of the successful rescue spread. The cubs who had helped design the rescue robots were beaming with pride. They had used their unique abilities to save lives across the galaxy. This is just the beginning, Vex said to Tejo as they watched the celebration below. Word of what we accomplished today will spread to other worlds. More species will want to work with us. And he was right. Over the following weeks, requests for assistance came from across the galaxy. A water crisis on a desert world that needed both human technology and Korath understanding of underground rivers. A diplomatic conflict that required translators who could think in ways that bridged different cultures. An archaeological discovery that needed both human scientific methods and Korath intuitive understanding of ancient patterns. Each success brought new opportunities and new challenges. Traditional Korath packs began sending their own unusual cubs to the colony, no longer seeing them as failures but as potential bridges to a larger universe. Human research teams requested assignments to the colony, eager to learn from this unprecedented cooperation. The colony grew from a small research station to a thriving city, but it never lost the feeling of family that had started with one dying cub and the humans who refused to let him suffer alone. One evening, as Vex walked through the gardens where human vegetables grew alongside Korath medicinal plants, he encountered a familiar figure. His father, Taruk, stood among the growing things, looking older but somehow more peaceful than Vex remembered. "Hello, father," Vex said quietly. "Hello, my son Taruk," replied. "I have been watching what you have built here. It is ... remarkable." They walked together in comfortable silence for a while, father and son reconnecting after so much time and change. "I came to ask your forgiveness," Taruk said eventually, "and to ask if there might be a place here for an old warrior who is ready to learn new ways." Vex stopped walking and looked at his father with surprise. "You want to join us, my pack?" "Half split," Taruk explained. "Half want to follow the traditional ways, half want to send their different cubs here to learn. I find myself caught between two worlds, just as you once were." "And which world do you choose?" Vex asked. Taruk smiled, and for the first time, Vex saw real warmth in his father's eyes. "I choose the world where my son is building something beautiful, where strength comes not from standing alone, but from choosing to stand together." As the two Korath embraced, cubs and humans gathered around them. The family that had started with one act of compassion had grown to include hundreds, and it was still growing. Looking up at the stars visible through the jungle canopy, Vex thought about the future. There would be more challenges ahead. Not everyone would accept this new way of living. There would be conflicts and setbacks and moments of doubt, but there would also be discoveries and friendships and achievements that no single species could have imagined alone. There would be cubs who grew up knowing they belonged, regardless of what made them different. There would be humans and Korath, and eventually, other species all working together to build something better than any of them could create alone. The wild had once turned its back on a small, weak cub who did not fit the mold of what an apex predator should be. But humans had stepped in with compassion and patience and love. And from that simple beginning, a new kind of pack had been born. A pack where everyone belonged, where everyone contributed, where everyone was valued for exactly who they were. It was, Vex thought as he looked around at his extended family, the strongest pack in the galaxy.